The bread was still warm. I had baked it that morning. Same recipe I had used 100 times. Same kitchen, same hands. I set it on the table the way I always did, in the center, on the wooden board, with the cloth folded beside it. My mother was standing 3 feet away from me at the stove. She did not turn around. She did not say good morning. She did not acknowledge that I had walked into the room. She stood at that stove with her back to me and stirred something that did not need stirring, and the silence between us was the loudest thing I had ever heard in my life. I was still living in the house. That was the part nobody tells you about. I had not left. I had not gone anywhere. I was right there, sleeping in the same bed I had slept in since childhood, eating at the same table, breathing the same air, and yet, as of 3 days ago, I was invisible. I was dead to them, not in anger, not in cruelty, in obedience, in faith, in the precise, terrible, community-sanctioned act of love that my family believed they were performing by pretending I did not exist. It was called the Meidung, and I had known about it my whole life. I had simply never understood until that morning with the warm bread on the table and my mother's back 3 feet away from me, what it actually felt like from the inside. My name is Ruth. I was 23 years old, and this is the story of the months I spent being dead while I was still alive. I need to take you back to what happened, not to the Meidung itself, but to the thing that caused it, because the silence does not make sense without the sound that came before it. I had been baptized at 20. In our old order community in Pennsylvania, baptism was the moment everything became official. The moment you stood before the church and the bishop and your entire community and said, out loud and in full understanding, that you were choosing this life. The Ordnung, the boundaries, the separation from the world, the agreement that the community's way was your way and would be your way until you died. I had meant it when I said it. I had meant every word. The problem was that meaning something at 20 and meaning it at 23 are not always the same thing. The 3 years between my baptism and the Meidung were years in which I changed in ways I had not predicted and could not prevent. Not dramatically, not through any single event I could point to. I changed the way water changes stone, slowly, consistently, in ways that only became visible once enough time had passed. By 22, I was carrying questions that had no acceptable home in my life. By 23, I had begun, carefully and then less carefully, to act on them. I made contact with people outside the community. I had conversations I was not supposed to have. I made a decision about my future that directly contradicted the life I had committed to at my baptism. I brought it to the bishop myself. I want you to know that. I did not wait to be caught. I went to him on a Tuesday morning, and I sat across from him at the table in his home, and I told him the truth. All of it. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Ruth, you understand what this means?" I said yes. I understood. The Meidung was announced to the church that Sunday. Here is what I did not understand, despite thinking I understood everything. I did not understand the texture of it. The daily, hourly, minute-by-minute texture of being shunned while still living inside the household where the shunning was being practiced. I had thought about the shunning in large terms, the loss, the grief, the separation. I had not thought about the bread on the table. I had not thought about my mother's back 3 feet away from me. I had not thought about the specific, grinding, impossible weight of ordinary moments stripped of their ordinary acknowledgement. My father passed me in the hallway on the 4th day. He was carrying a bucket. I was standing at the linen chest. Our eyes met for 1 second. 1 second in which I saw everything he felt, and he saw everything I felt, and then he looked away and kept walking, and the bucket made its ordinary sound, and I stood at the linen chest alone. I pressed my hand flat against the wall. I breathed. That was what the Meidung actually was. Not one large, devastating moment. 1,000 small ones, stacked on top of each other. Every meal where the chair I sat in was slightly separated from the others at the table. Every morning where good morning was said to everyone in the room except me. Every evening where the lamp was passed around and my hand was simply skipped. Not aggressively, not with anger, with a precise and practiced and completely consistent invisibility that said, more clearly than any words could have said it, you made a choice. This is the consequence of the choice. We love you and we cannot reach you, and both of those things are true at the same time. My younger sister Emma was 12. She had not been told in explicit terms what she was supposed to do with me. She was too young for the full weight of the Meidung to have been placed on her shoulders, and so she existed in a kind of painful middle space. She knew she was not supposed to engage with me normally, and she tried, in the earnest way of a 12-year-old trying to do the right thing. But sometimes she forgot. Or maybe she did not forget. Maybe she decided. On the 7th day, she came into the kitchen while I was there alone, and she stood beside me and she said, "Ruth, do you want some tea?" 4 words. Do you want some tea? I looked at her small, serious, torn face, and I felt something crack open in my chest that I am not sure has ever fully closed again. I said, "Yes. Thank you, Emma." She made the tea. We sat for 11 minutes and did not say another word. Then she heard our mother's footsteps on the stairs, and she got up quickly and went outside. I sat with the tea and the 11 minutes and the crack in my chest, and I thought, this is what love looks like when the rules are breaking it apart. This is what it costs everyone, not just me, all of us. Every single person in this house is paying for my choice. That thought was the hardest one. Harder than my father's eyes in the hallway. Harder than my mother's back at the stove. The understanding that the Meidung was not only happening to me, it was happening through my family. They were being required to wound me with their silence, and the wounding was also costing them, and the cost was real, and it was mine to carry, because I had been the one who chose. Weeks passed. The texture did not change. Warm bread on the table, back turned at the stove, chair slightly separate, name not spoken. I existed in that house as a kind of ghost, present in every physical sense, absent in every human one. I ate, I slept, I worked, I moved through the days with the particular focus of someone who has nothing left to hold on to, except the decision that brought them here, and the belief, which I had to rebuild every morning from scratch, that the decision had been worth it. On the 41st day, my mother came into the room where I was sitting alone after supper. She sat down across from me. She did not say anything for a long time. She looked at her hands. I looked at mine. Outside the window, the sky was going dark over the fields, the particular blue-gray of a Pennsylvania evening in November. Then she said, "Ruth," just my name. One word, and in that one word was everything that the 41 days of silence had been holding back. I looked up. Her eyes were full. Mine were full. We sat across from each other in the blue-gray evening light, and we did not touch, and we did not say anything more, and it lasted maybe 2 minutes. Then she stood up and left the room, and the Meidung continued. But something had passed between us in those 2 minutes that the Meidung could not reach. Something that existed underneath the rules, underneath the community's authority, underneath everything that had been placed between us. Something that was simply a mother and a daughter, looking at each other across 41 days of required silence, saying without words, "I know you are there. I have always known you are there." I left the house 6 weeks after that evening, not because I could not bear it anymore, though there were days when that was true, but because staying was beginning to cost my family more than it was worth. Every day I was there was another day my mother had to practice her grief in real time. Another day my father had to walk past me in the hallway. Another day Emma had to choose between the rules and her sister. I left so they could begin to heal in whatever way the community allowed them to heal. The night I left, my mother was in the kitchen. I did not say goodbye. I could not say goodbye. The Meidung did not permit it, and I would not put her in the position of having to turn away from my goodbye. I stood in the hallway for a moment, and I listened to the sounds of her in the kitchen, and I memorized them. The particular rhythm of her movements, the small sounds that had been the background of my entire life. Then I walked out the front door. I want to tell you something about the Meidung that I could not have understood before I lived it. From the outside it looks like punishment. From the inside, from deep inside, past the pain of it looks like something more complicated than punishment. It looks like a community trying, in the only way it knows how, to hold itself together, to protect the thing it has built, to say, we made an agreement, and the agreement matters, and the consequence of breaking it is real. I do not agree with the tool. I do not think silence is love, regardless of the intention behind it. But I understand now what it was not. It was not hatred. It was not indifference. It was a broken kind of love doing the only thing the rules allowed it to do. My mother said my name on the 41st day because love, eventually, finds the crack in every wall that is built against it. Even walls built by faith. Even walls built by community. Even walls built by 41 days of practiced, faithful, heartbreaking silence. She said my name, and I heard it, and that was enough to carry me out the door and into whatever came next. I want to ask you something tonight. Have you ever been on the receiving end of a silence that was not indifference, that was, in its own terrible way, a form of love that had no better tool available to it? And if you have, did you find the thing underneath the silence? The thing it could not quite manage to hide? Because I believe it is always there, underneath the rules, underneath the walls, underneath even 41 days of a mother not saying her daughter's name. The love is always there, finding the crack, waiting.